Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Stephanie's Larlin. I'm Stephanie. So because I've been gone for quite a long time, I decided that I'm going to do a bit of a wrap-up video on the books I've read recently, so specifically since January of this year. I've read 11 books since January. We're gonna kind of just get straight into it. Also, I will say, because I've been reading these books since January, I might forget a few elements of the books and also just a few of my thoughts because I really just need to start writing down reviews. Started off the year with a banger, a 4-star book. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. I actually read it on my Kindle because I got a Kindle for Christmas, so that has been just my favorite thing in the world. The book was Summer Suns by Lee Mandello. This book is kind of like a horror thriller type book. If you know me, if you've watched my videos before, you know I don't really read any horror type books. Like, I really don't like horror media in general. I don't like being scared of things. But this book was about Andrew, who was best friends with this boy called Eddie. 6 months before Andrew is meant to join Eddie at college or at university, he finds out that Eddie is after dying by suicide. Andrew kind of doesn't really believe that Eddie could do something like this. Goes down to the college they were supposed to attend together and moves into the house he was supposed to live in with his best friend Eddie and their 2 or 3 roommates, I think. So the book is kind of like a mystery thriller with horror elements and supernatural ghostly elements, while Andrew figures out or tries to figure out what happened to his best friend. And there's a lot of just kind of my favorite type of like really complicated feelings between like best friends and the childhood friends to lovers type trope. And also just the fact that there's the horror element just ups the stakes so much. So I rated this 4 stars. Like I said, I did really enjoy it. And I went back to actually reread it, I think a month or 2 ago. I didn't end up continuing my reread, but I just really loved the book so much. Also the cover, so cool, like creepy but so cool. I finished that on the 2nd of January. So the next book I read, which I read and I finished on the 13th of January, was An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. And I've been wanting to read this series for such a long time. I've heard so much about it. I've heard so much about just the different tropes, but also not just the romance in the book, but the characters and being such complex and strong lead characters. So this book is about a girl called Leia. I think that's how you pronounce her name. Her brother ends up getting caught in a rebel group and gets arrested for treason in this world. And she kind of ends up joining up with the rebel group to be a spy for them and infiltrates this huge academy of soldiers in this world. And it's really high stakes again. It's quite dangerous for her to be a spy in there. So she meets this guy called Elias, and he's one of these soldiers, but also he's one of the soldiers there that does not want to be there. He does not believe in the things he's being taught, in the way the world is. These two kind of meet through being in this compound and kind of work together a little bit. And there's a bit of elements of fantasy in this. I think it actually is a fantasy. It actually is. It's a fantasy series. Maybe I'm just a bit silly and didn't really notice that. The fantasy in this book is quite subtle until I think like midway through. I really enjoyed it. I rated it 4.5 stars. I can't remember why I didn't give it 5 stars. Maybe it just didn't have that 5-star feel, but I really enjoyed the dynamic and relationship between our 2 main characters, and also it switched POVs, which I really enjoyed. I do really like when books do that, but it does have to be done a certain way for me to like it, you know. I was actually really interested in the world as well, and just all the political intrigue. Everything was just top tier. Really, really, really good. And I also like ate it up. It's 446 pages and I read it in like 2 days, I think, or 3 days. Then the next book I read on the 1st of March. God, that's a big jump. Oh my God, that just tells you that I've just been really falling off it. I had a bit of a reading slump. So I finished An Ember in the Ashes on the 13th of January. And then the next book I read was Fell Lady Fortune on March 1st. Yeah, Fell Lady Fortune by Chloe Gong. I read Our Violent Ends, I think it was a year ago now, because it was the start of 2022. And I was obsessed with that book. I'm obsessed with Chloe Gong's book, and this was nothing different. I gave this book 5 stars. Are we surprised? No. I haven't annotated it, but I need to go back in and reread it and annotate it. Also, how beautiful is this cover? I know I've seen a lot of people shitting on this cover on Twitter, to be honest, but I think it's stunning. I love it. I love that it's pink. Oh, it's just beautiful. The detail, fab. I love it. This book is kind of, it's kind of a spin-off series on These Violent Lights, I think, because it does have characters from those books. This follows Rosalind Lang from These Violent Lights. She's a side character and she is Juliet's cousin. It's kind of a bit of a spoiler, but not really. But basically, Rosalind ends up getting killed, but somehow she wakes up and she quickly finds out that she has been scientifically experimented on and she is now immortal. Slay. He becomes an assassin, and honestly, I wasn't really very, not interested, but I just didn't really pick up on a lot of the different plot details for the political parts of it. But I just know that it's during a civil war, civil kind of unrest, and she's on one side and her twin sister is on the other. Now, her twin sister doesn't really play that big of a role, but it does change point of views as well in between Rosalind, her twin sister, and then the other main character, Orion. So Orion is also a spy, and it ends up that him and Rosalind have to have this cover story of them being married. Don't get me started. I'm obsessed. So they're both working for the same agency kind of thing, the same side of the war. And yeah, their cover story is that they're married and they have to infiltrate this like newspaper place to try get information for their political party. I think that's the gist of it. Oh my God. I just love this book. Rosalind and Orion, their dynamic, their banter, every single thing about them, I am so obsessed. I love them separately as their own individual characters, but also together. Like, oh my God, incredible. Literally love their dynamic. So good. I was laughing out loud and also just like blushing. Oh my God, so good. Like, I actually cannot explain how Chloe Gong's books like just take over my life. Like, I also ate this up. I read this in like literally, I think like 2 days, not even. And oh my God, it's so good. I would recommend this to everyone. It is incredible. The next book I read and I finished on the 6th of March is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. I had before this read obviously the Heartstopper graphic novels by Alice Oseman, and I think I had read Solitaire as well, or else Loveless, one or the other. And I'm obsessed with the Heartstopper graphic novels, like obviously, who's not? I really enjoyed Solitaire a lot, and the same with Loveless. So I decided to kind of work my way through Alice Oseman's books. This is about a girl called Frances, who her entire life is studying, and her entire life is her grades and how she'll get into college, all that kind of thing. But also she has a kind of secret obsession with this web comic YouTube video thing. I'm not really sure what it is. I can't remember. It's been a while since I read this. She's so obsessed with it. She stays up all night watching it. She has a Twitter fan page for it as well, I think. And just, she is like a stan. She doesn't really have many friends in school and stuff because of how isolated her studying regime makes her. And she also kind of just doesn't see the point in it. And then she ends up meeting this guy, Alid. And Alid is actually the twin brother to the one girl that Frances used to be friends with when she was younger. One day, this girl ends up disappearing. Frances befriends Alid, and it's kind of like this straight away instant friendship that they have, and it's so good, and they both feel so understood by each other. And radio silence is one of the things that they bond over, and we kind of just figure out alongside Frances as she figures out and finds out who radio silence actually is. I read it so quickly and I just thought it had a lot of really poignant moments about friendship and just how people can be understood through fandoms and through art and books and videos. I just thought it was really beautiful. It was a really beautiful book. I rated it 4 stars if I didn't say that already. The next book I read, I was procrastinating reading for months. months and months and months. I literally got this book for Christmas and I only read it on the 9th of March. Well, I finished it on the 9th of March. Because I was scared. To be honest, I did not want this series to end. You might have already guessed already what I'm about to talk about. Like, the world is my whole life. So, if you didn't guess already, it is Grey Warren by Maggie Stiefvater, which is the third and final book in the Dreamer trilogy, which is a spin-off series from the Raven Cycle. I'm going to start off by saying I rated this book 5 stars, like, obviously. Secondly, I'm trying to remember what happens in this. Now, I don't really want to talk that much in depth because obviously it's the last book in a series, but it basically follows a character from the Raven Cycle called Ronan Lynch and another few new characters that are the same type of person as Ronan Lynch and have the same skills as him. I don't want to say much more because I don't want to spoil it. This book kind of just follows on from the second book in the series, and it's kind of dealing with all the chaos that was the second book. The way the Dreamer trilogy is in my head is the first book, which is Call Down the Hawk, is a really interesting first book in a series. Like, we're finding out all these characters and we're finding out all this different world development and everything. And then the second book is just utter chaos. I'm pretty sure Maggie Stiefvater refers to it as the middle child, which I am the middle child, so I mean, I can understand where she's coming from. This was the final book in the series to tie all that together, to answer all the questions that were left unanswered. Oh, I loved it. I loved it. It did take me a little while to kind of get into. Honestly, like, I'm trying to remember what even happened in this, because I feel like with my favorite series, they kind of mesh into one, which is just not great. In this, we found out a lot more about the other Lynch brothers. So there's Ronan Lynch, and then his younger brother Matthew, and then his older brother Declan. And all three of them are orphans, and they have a very interesting dynamic. It's very, very interesting. It's one of my favorite sibling dynamics I've ever read, and kind of family dynamics. I just think it's so well written, so realistic, and so complicated, and I just love it. I love it so much. It puts a perfect bow on the series. It really ties everything up, and it gives context to so many things in the story. It gives reasons for how characters behave and why they behave like that, and I just loved it so much. It was phenomenal. And also the ending, if you've read this series, if you've read The Raven Cycle, you know the ending genuinely broke my heart. I was crying, like, oh my god, it was just such a beautiful ending. Now, I have seen reviews that said it was a bit rushed, but I did enjoy it. I did think it was a nice ending. I'm not ready to be done with these characters in this world. It really hurt my heart to finish it. Okay, the next book I read, I finished on March 17th. So that's actually St. Patrick's Day, if you didn't know, if you're not from Ireland. But that book was One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. I had been wanting to read this for a while, and I have read Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. When I heard that there was a sapphic book coming from this author, I was like, yes, please give it to me right now. I had heard mixed reviews, so I finally picked it up in March, and I actually rated this 3 stars. Now, in saying that, it wasn't like a really low 3 stars. It was a higher kind of 3 stars. It was just a pretty average book for me. We're following this 23-year-old college student called August, where when she moves to New York, moves from home all by herself, and moves in with these new roommates, which are all so cool, by the way. Love them. One day when she's getting the subway, are they the same thing? I don't know, I'm not from America. Anyways, she gets the subway to college every day, to university, and she ends up one day meeting this like drop dead gorgeous girl called Jane, and she's just so cool. She wears a leather jacket, she has like short hair, she has all these cool pins from the 80s, the 70s. She's very much giving what August wants, right? And so she ends up kind of falling in love with this girl, but then she finds out that this girl is stuck on the subway and she can't leave. And she actually is from the 70s. She's from 1970. She's been stuck on the subway ever since. So August is kind of on this mission to get Jane off the subway, bring her home with her, you know, you're coming home with me. I rated this book 3 stars. I think it was just a pretty average book for me. I did really enjoy the bits of spice in this book was good. And like just the dynamic between Jane and August was a nice, fun, flirty romance. Like I really enjoyed it. But overall, I did think this book was too long. Like it was just a bit much, and I didn't really like the kind of sci-fi element. The fact that it was like time travel, like she was from the 70s. I just didn't vibe with that much, because for me, when I'm reading things like that, it has to be extremely futuristic, or it has to be like completely fantasy based and not really like our reality at all, because otherwise I just get too caught up in being like, this is the real world kind of thing. Like I read for escapism, do you know what I mean? So when I read stuff that's based in the real world, I just don't really like it, like urban fantasy, stuff like that. The next book I read, I finished on March 29th. I read this after watching season 2 of Shadow and Bone. Now, I've spoken about Shadow and Bone, the book series, the spin-off series, and the spin-off TV series on my channel before. You've seen my videos on that. You all know my thoughts. I'm just going to reiterate again if you haven't seen those. I hate the Shadow and Bone book series. I love the Six of Crows book series. And I love the Shadow and Bone Netflix TV series. So after watching season 2 of Shadow and Bone, which I adored by the way, I finally decided to pick up the other spin-off series, which is the King of Scars series. I had originally wanted to read this series but decided against it because I thought it would be more of the Shadow and Bone kind of type, but it's actually more of the Six of Crows, which I'm a big fan of. So now I know why everyone's raving about this series, and has been for a long time. This book, if you don't know, it follows characters from Shadow and Bone, and also some from Six of Crows, and it takes place after Crooked Kingdom, the second book in the Six of Crows duology. And we're following the King of Rabcat, Nikolai. And oh my god, first off, I just want to say I love him. I love that man. Oh my god, I love him. And also we follow Zoya Nazyalinsky, I think that's how you say her name. And she's one of the Grisha. So if you don't know, this is a book in the Grishaverse. I'm pretty sure like everyone knows, so I'm not even going to explain it, to be quite honest. I'm not arsed. It kind of just follows after the events of Crooked Kingdom, like I said, but also after the events of Shadow and Bone. Now, I did not know the specific events that happened in the end of the Shadow and Bone series, and a lot of it is not really said in Shadow and Bone season 1 on Netflix. So I didn't know anything going into this, but I quickly found out about the Darkling and how the Shadow and Bone book series ended, and how that affected Nikolai. So we're kind of just following him after the events of the battle with the Darkling, and how that affected him and his journey through what he's going through, and also just a bunch of new kind of fantastical elements with other new characters, I'm gonna say. I thought this was so good. I ate it up. I gave it 4.5 stars. I don't know why I didn't give it 5 stars, to be honest, but I'm so excited to jump into the next one as well. I really need to get it. I'm obsessed, absolutely obsessed with not only Zoya by herself, and I love Nikolai too, but like Zoya, like queen, but I'm also just so obsessed with Zoya and Nikolai and their dynamic and their relationship. Like so good. Incredible. Leigh Bardugo has done it again. So the next book I read and I finished on April 9th. And it was another book by Alice Oseman. It was I Was Born for This by Alice Oseman, and I again loved this book. I gave it 4 stars, and it follows Angel, who is obsessed with this boy band called The Ark, and she is a stan. Like, she is a stan, and it's all about, again, fandoms and just finding your person through fandoms and just being so obsessed with fandom. And then we also follow one of the band members called Jimmy, and kind of just his life and navigating life as a pop star. I thought that element was just so good. The fact that we got insight into someone who is so famous, and famous at a young age, and also he's the same age as Angel. So I just thought that the two of those complementing each other was really interesting. I loved this book. I thought it just was written so well and really understood what it's like to be a fan. Alice Oseman is so gifted in regards to being so realistic to teenagers and young adults and how they feel about different things, especially the things they love. And I read this in like 2 days. It was a nice read. I have 3 books left. The next book I finished on April 15th. I read it on my Kindle as well. And it is the 3rd book in the Locked Tomb series by Tamsin Muir. And it is called Nona the Ninth. I've probably mentioned Gideon the Ninth before, and I had really been anticipating reading Harrow the Ninth and really wanted to read the next book in the series after I finished Harrow the Ninth. It did take me quite a while to read that book, mostly because I wanted to get it physically, and then I decided one day to just read it on my Kindle. So the third book in the Locked Tomb series follows a new character, and much like when you're reading any book in the Locked Tomb series, for me anyways, I'm so confused for like 70% of the book, and then the rest of the book I'm like, oh, these things are making sense, and I'm like, oh my god, slay, this is so good, right? And then when you reread it, it's like, this is incredible. I have yet to reread Gideon the Ninth or Harrow the Ninth, but I really need to reread them. Like I said, Nona the Ninth follows a new character, and it's also kind of in a new world in the universe. It's really interesting. Honestly, couldn't really tell you much of what happened, except for I was kind of guessing the plot twist a bit, and then at the end, like obviously when it was told and everything and revealed, I was like, oh my god, slay. I kind of like realized that, but it was also like I barely even touched the surface on what I'd guessed. It was very complex. I rated this book 3.5 stars, mostly because when I finished it, I didn't get that sense of achievement and satisfaction from all the confusion. So like I was saying earlier, Gideon the Ninth and Harrow the Ninth are extremely confusing up until a point, and then you get to start to understand, and then all these things start happening, and it's really good. And the confusion of the rest of the book is worth it because it just makes the realization so much better. But for Nona the Ninth, the confusion lasted for most of the book, and even at the end when I figured out what had happened, I was still just as confused, to be honest, and I literally had to look up like what it meant, what had happened. And even after that, I was like, okay, so that makes sense, but I was still kind of quite confused. Now, it could be just my intelligence level isn't there, but also I just feel like it didn't give me the satisfaction that the other books in the series did, and it just didn't play out as well as it could have. But in saying that, I do like there were some characters in there that I had previously loved from the other books, and also new characters that I fell in love with that were great. It was just an okay kind of book. I expected more from it. I think maybe because I was so hyped after reading Harrow the Ninth that it was quite a disappointment. I really do want to read the next book, but the next book isn't out yet. I think the next book is called Alecto the Ninth, and I just need that book right now because I need to understand all my confusion from Nona the Ninth. After that, I read a book called Iced Out by C.E. Ritchie, and it was just a hockey romance, and I rated it 2 stars because honestly it was just not it. I wanted like a fun romance. It just wasn't it, so I'm not even going to talk about that much because I just did not like it. Kind of was not worth my time, but I still finished anyways because I needed the sense of completion. And then the last book I've read recently was, honestly, I think it was a pretty solid book. I rated it 3.5 stars and I finished it on the 26th of April. And it was A Dark and Hollow Star by Ashley Shuttleworth. Now, the cover, can we just say the cover? The cover is insane. It is a first book in a fantasy series. It's kind of like an urban fantasy. Like I was saying earlier, I'm not a big fan of urban fantasies, and that was kind of one of the things I didn't really like about this book, which I mean I should have known going into it that I wouldn't, but the reason why I read it is because it's kind of like a found family trope. There's, I think, 4 main characters in total, and they're all queer characters as well, which I was really excited about. And I thought that the way the book was written with kind of jumping point of views between those 4 characters was nice. At first it was quite confusing, but once I got to know the characters, it was satisfying to be able to go back and forth. And you know, I didn't prefer really one character dynamic over another, you know, the way that sometimes happens with point of views. I honestly can't really even tell you the plot of this book. Like, it was a lot. It's quite a long book because it's the first book in a fantasy series. It was a lot of world building, and I think sometimes it just got a bit too info dumpy, and I was just more so there for the relationship, or kind of the only thing I liked out of the book. Don't think I'll continue with the series, to be quite honest. It was a fun book to read. I think it was, like I said, a bit too info dumpy, and it took too much of my brain power. It felt a bit chaotic, but I liked the characters. It was kind of a fun time. Not the best fun time, but kind of a fun time. I will not be continuing with the series. I will say that. That has been all the books that I've read since January of this year. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for watching. And if you are someone who has been subscribed since I was actually posting on this channel, thank you for staying here. I'm hoping to be putting up more videos soon because I've missed doing all these booktube videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!